Image 1. A jar full of coins, 5 pence, 10 pence, 20 pence coins. How many of you have one of those or have ever had one of those? And how many of you have ever had the experience of taking that stash of coins to a Coinstar machine in a supermarket? Having that experience of the satisfying metallic rush of the coins as they're being processed, counted, and you get the reward of your credit note. So imagine that you're on your way to the Coinstar machine. You arrive at the supermarket, and just outside is a homeless person begging for money. How many of you hand over your stash of coins? How many of you walk on by? How many of you feel uncomfortable answering that question? Well, that's the feeling that Melissa Dahl, in her book, Cringeworthy, A Theory of Awkwardness, describes to us. It's that feeling of being seen, of being implicitly judged. Now, does that feeling of moral queasiness actually change anything? In the Coinstar example, probably not, because it's a momentary feeling, and you do just walk on by. You might feel a moment of compassion for that human tragedy in the moment, but it's unlikely to prompt any lasting change on your part. Image 2. There are 409 million visits to Amazon.co.uk every month. That translates into a whole lot of orders. So let's imagine an Amazon warehouse. We have workers walking around the warehouse, picking up goods to fulfill the orders. But the organization of the warehouse makes no sense at all in terms of human intuition. The warehouse is organized not by type, but by a complex set of algorithms that dictate the most efficient movement between goods to collect them. So as James Bridle notes in his book, The New Dark Age, Technology and the End of the Future, the Amazon warehouse cannot be navigated by human intuition. So the Amazon workers have handheld devices. They need those because it makes no sense otherwise. Human beings expect things to be organized in human-like ways. Books to the left, CDs to the right, stationery over here, and so on. But to rational machine intelligence, such an organization makes no sense whatsoever. It's deeply inefficient. So Amazon uses a logistics technique called chaotic storage. Chaotic, that is, from a human point of view. So goods are organized by association rather than by type to allow for the shortest path between them. That means that all the Amazon worker has to do is look at the screen on their handheld device, pack, carry, and move on. What Bridle argues is that this actually accelerates their oppression. They are being expected to act like robots, while for the moment remaining ever so slightly cheaper than them. Image 3. You're in a boat with fellow passengers. One of them falls overboard. Do you jump in with them? Of course not. You reach out a hand to try and help them back in. But this is an image that philosophers have sometimes used to describe the difference between empathy and compassion. Empathy is feeling someone's pain, so you jump in with them. Compassion is about reaching out a hand to help. Empathy risks creating paralysis. Compassion is about creating a bias towards action. Now, you're probably wondering what these three quite disconnected examples might mean together. What links them? Well, what links them is the human being at the center. The human being who might be in poverty, who might be suffering, who might be facing obsolescence in the face of technological advances. Above all, the human being who is forced to make a choice, to act or not, to intervene or not. Now, the research that we undertake in universities has a really vital role to play in addressing some of these very human challenges. And surely within that, then, the disciplines that place the importance of the human being at the center, the humanities, have got a key role to play as well. But those disciplines aren't grounded in scientific data or empirical facts. They're grounded in an exploration of uncertainty, emotion, unknowing in its broadest sense. And it's perhaps because of that that humanities scholars have often seen themselves as being on the margins of global challenge research, which tends to favor scientific responses. The challenge of COVID and the fear of COVID, for example, was probably due in part to the fact that we had a momentary shaking of our faith in science. Contrary to all expectations, for once there wasn't a medical solution readily available. And the public at large was faced in that position of unknowing in which science wasn't giving us the answers. Now that lack of faith in science Didn't last very long. I think that there continued to be that faith in it. And the public then shifted their focus towards the search for a vaccine. And vaccine fever took on the proportions of football fever as a national obsession. At this time, the expertise of scientists was being played out constantly on news media, on social media. The vast majority of research funding was also rightly being directed towards scientific responses to COVID. But what this made me think at the time was, what does this mean for the humanities? Are we witnessing a death blow for the humanities if a vaccine for these apparently ailing disciplines isn't found? Or is the death of the humanities just another conspiracy theory? Now, I firmly believe that what we study in the humanities has a unique power and value. And that power is something that takes us beyond that momentary sense of discomfort that we talked about with the Coinstar example. It's also a power that takes us beyond that sense of unknowing as something negative that James Bridle talks us, into a place where unknowing can be productive. We've all had the experience of reading a book, watching a film, watching a play, when suddenly what you're seeing pulls you up short. It doesn't make sense to you. It doesn't sit easily with you. It might be a character in a play or in a film that's expressing an opinion that you might intellectually reject, maybe a political opinion that you intellectually reject but viscerally connect with. It might be an image of suffering, of poverty, of brutality close to home that forces us to question our own society and our perceptions of it as advanced and civilized, and our own identities as liberal cosmopolitans. When this happens, the work of art holds you captive in that moment of moral discomfort. It doesn't allow you just to walk on past. And I talk about this as a moment of affective shock. It's always when this moment of kind of bodily, almost visceral discomfort makes you pause. You can't shake it off. It's unsettling. It forces you to begin to interrogate, why do I feel this way? It forces you to look at yourself. And it's in this moment that the work of art has that unique power to take that moment of unknowing and uncertainty and move you towards a position of genuinely disruptive thinking, where you question your assumptions and begin to think differently. And it's that, in turn, that we can harness to genuine social change and social activism. Melissa Dahl talks about a theory of awkwardness. What I want to think about is how works of art can help us move towards an ethics and a practice of awkwardness, where we move beyond that momentary discomfort of the Coinstar machine, but walk on by, and when unknowing can become something much more positive that can mobilize communities and populations to think differently. If we view it in this way, works of art aren't just about aesthetic pleasure. They can be tools that we can actively deploy, as I've said, to mobilize and motivate communities and populations to think differently and to act differently. They're not just about raising awareness. They're not just about allowing us a fictional character who helps us work through our experience by empathizing with them. What I'm thinking of here is a place where humanities scholars are sitting around the table with engineers, scientists, medics. They're there at the very start when we're thinking about how do we begin to tackle the challenges we're facing. The scientists, the engineers, and the medics are going to find the technical solutions. But if we don't have the humanities around the table and the knowledge that they can deploy through, for example, works of art, then we're not going to have the sorts of behavioral change, the action, even the activism that will allow genuine change to happen, whether that's in relation to pandemic preparedness or whether that's in relation to climate change. So what I'm thinking about here is a vision for the humanities, a rethinking of the humanities that goes beyond what really powerful advocates like Louise Richardson have described. Louise Richardson talks about how medics will help us live a longer life, but the humanities will help us live that longer life better. I want to think of the humanities as being part of the frontline approach. And that's the case for the research we conduct, but it's also the case for how we operate in our organizations and in our societies. Humanities scholars are skilled in understanding the underlying assumptions, the underlying biases, the underlying prejudices that can dictate even the most innocent of situations. Imagine you work in a large organization, a crisis situation has occurred, you're the only woman in the room, and you're told your role is to go and support and comfort the person who has been the victim in this particular problem. You're not part of the other solutions, you do the female role. As a humanities scholar, as a woman, you can feel uncomfortable in that moment, you feel that discomfort, But we have to take that, harness it, direct it backwards, and create that sense of productive discomfort for others in the room so that they too can begin to challenge their assumptions. This works for our research, but it works for how we organize our societies. The humanities have a very powerful voice there. So final thought, which takes us back to the fellow passenger in the boat who's fallen overboard. Empathy is jumping in with them. Compassion is reaching out a hand to pull them back in. Empathy risks creating paralysis. Compassion has a bias towards action. As humanities scholars, let's not jump into the water ourselves. Let's be part of the rescue. Thank you.